This episode of Bend the Knee is brought to you by Lord Adam of House Parker, Ward of White Harbor, Warden of the White Knife, whose words are, from the earth, wisdom.
Hello and welcome to Bend the Knee, a Song of Ice and Fire podcast. I am Sir Matt, the Bud Knight.
And I am Sir Ezra the Watchful. Welcome to our Song of Ice and Fire book club. Today we are into chapter, which chapter? With 13?
Yes.
Wow, it's good. You updated it for me. Perfect. And of Game of Thrones, and also Maegor the First, or Maegor the Cruel, in A World of Ice and Fire. Mm-hmm. And this is huge, guys. Today we have a big episode.
Huge episode.
Yeah. So we're just going to apologize ahead of time.
Yeah. We did do a kind of expedited episode. It was a rushed episode on Friday with our Fallout Friday.
Yeah.
And so we said we would make this a bigger episode, and we're going to, we keep true to our promise. A man is only as good as his word.
That's right. So, real quickly, we always put this at the front here. For our Follow-Up Friday, if you have a question about this episode or would like to talk about anything in the chapters, please send us a raven at btkcast@gmail.com. We read those on Friday, and we discuss them. They lead us down many, many rabbit holes. So, we enjoy that. Also, we have a number at 614-547-2350. All right, Sir Matt, it is time for us to jump into the small council. Mm-hmm. Any updates?
Yeah, so some people have asked for our personal, our Instagrams. They want to follow us on Instagram. So not just we have BTK Cast is our show Instagram,
right,
where we just post mostly Game of Thrones stuff. But if you specifically want to follow Sir Ezra or myself, you can follow me at Super Gainsbros, all one word. That's also my Twitter. And Sir Ezra, where can people follow you on the internet?
Yeah, you can find me at WompRat_2M on both Instagram and Twitter.
Yep.
So
okay. So, all right, let's go ahead and jump into some news here. So, big kind of announcement. We talked a little bit about it on Follow-Up Friday, but that is Gur's one of his original works published way back in 1979. The Ice Dragon is going to be getting an animated movie.
Wow. That is, and we did talk about it on Friday, and it is super interesting. I haven't read it myself. You've read it, right?
I have it. I've skimmed through it.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not very long. It's actually a children's book.
Yeah.
And it's funny because publishers say that it takes place in the A Song of Ice and Fire universe.
Right.
Gur himself has disputed this. But if you kind of read the synopsis of it, it has a lot of similarities, or you could view it because he wrote it 10 years before, maybe a little bit longer,
right, before
he started working on A Game of Thrones. Because Game of Thrones, I think actually the first book released early 90s. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he anyway, so if you look at it, it has a lot of similarities to some of the ideas are very similar to what Game of Thrones ends up being. There's a girl who has an ice dragon and she fights a fire dragon, and she lives in this land that's always winter, and there's just a lot to it, and spring is coming, and so it's just kind of interesting. There's some things. But it's going to be handled by Warner Brothers. And we don't know exactly when this is coming out, just that it's been announced.
But it doesn't make you think if he was going back to this, and because it seems like he's consumed with all things Game of Thrones. I know he did publish not too long ago another thing, didn't he?
Right.
Some other book that he was working on or whatever.
Yeah, he has some other books,
and that's good. That's therapeutic, right?
Yeah.
We want Gur to feel comfortable, etc. But we know that really most of his attention is devoted towards finishing A Song of Ice and Fire, or building around that world. And the fact that he's doing this, the Ice Dragon, and it's so closely related, is just interesting.
Yeah. Hey, some people are one-trick ponies. That's okay, Gur. Nothing wrong with it.
Right. Exactly.
We can't all be George Lucas with Indiana Jones and Star Wars.
Wow.
Okay?
Good call. Good point.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Kingdoms of the Crystal Skull, best movie.
Oh, I don't think so.
Okay.
Whoa, boy, just get us in a tangent. What? Anything else from Small Council?
No, that's really kind of about it. But
Okay.
yeah, I just think it's cool. It's gonna. I still have not read through it. It's not very long. It's a children's book. It's not very long. And actually, the version that was released, he talks about it in like 2007. Has like really nice illustrations and stuff. So
Okay.
it's really cool.
All right, gotcha. So before we dive into the Maester study, I guess while we're still in Small Council, a couple announcements for just the show in general, and we kind of talk about what's happening here. We have today, if you're listening right now, we have the first episode of Black Council is up on patreon.com/bend the knee. And it's pretty sweaty.
Mm-hmm. It's a big. It's pretty big. Gonna be a pretty big episode. So
We dusted off several books.
we
for this
did.
one, so
We did. Yes. So our World of Ice and Fire study this week is on Maegor the First Targaryen, aka Maegor the Cruel, and we were going over. We're just going over our notes, and we're like, I feel like there's a lot more information we know about him. And
right, it's missing. Yeah,
And we're like, it's missing. And we're like, oh, yeah, it's because it's in the Book of Swords, the segment, The Sons of the Dragon, which was this. The Book of Swords is weird. So Gur releases things, and like novellas, they're called. I don't know specifically know exactly what a novella is, but it's almost like this mini story combined from segments of other things. And he's done a couple of these other ones throughout the past. And so this is like just information that's only kind of featured there.
right.
And
It's also a really good taste. I was telling Sir Matt earlier that it's a good taste of what Fire and Blood I think is going to be like or look like. And people have said, well, it's recycled information that he mentioned at some event. I can't remember the event that he was at, but still, to have in book form to be able to look at it, it's I think it's really good. And we were going over the notes, and I was just like, yeah, we're definitely missing some stuff here. So it actually covers the sons of the dragon. So you have Aegon the Conqueror and his two sons, Aenys and Maegor. So today we're focused on Maegor because that's the next chapter.
But you really can't talk about one without talking about the other.
Right, you kind of have to talk about them both. And so that's what your first Black Council episode 1 will be. It's posted right now. It is about the Sons of the Dragon, and we go over in depth a lot of cool stuff there. And it really helps you understand, I think, what is happening at the beginning of the conquest and shortly thereafter. A lot more details. You understand the realm a little bit better. And also, very, very interesting point here. I'm going to make one last plug for it. If you look at the main series and those who surround Cersei Lannister and those who are in and out of King's Landing, the names, the house names, directly correlate to the Sons of the Dragon. There's a lot of similar names. These people are referenced, and now we actually have something that talks about them and their interactions and what happened during Maegor the Cruel. So,
yeah. So, all right. Well, let's go ahead and dive into our Maester's study here. So Maegor Targaryen, the first of his name, came to the throne after the sudden death of his brother King Aenys in the year 42 AC. He is better remembered as Maegor the Cruel, and it is well earned. For no crueler king ever set the Iron Throne. His reign began with blood and ended in blood as well. The histories tell us he enjoyed war and battle, but it is clear that was violence that he most craved. Violence and the death, an absolute mastery over all he deemed his. What demon possessed him could none could say. Even today, some give thanks to the tyranny that his tyranny was a short one. For those who knew how many noble houses might have vanished under his under his rule. Yeah, and
Maegor, he killed off a lot of different people. I mean, he killed three of his maesters on his small council. He ended up having 4 maesters there, and the last one just barely survives because he's the last one.
Pretty much. Also, how many? And we'll get to it, but how many high septums? There are under his rule.
Right, and he has a lot of trouble with them. And when we left off last time, we were talking about Aenys Targaryen. So this is his older brother, and he's his older brother by about 3 years. And just to refresh you, Aegon had 2 sisters, which were Rhaenys and Visenya. Got that right, didn't I? And Rhaenys Targaryen is the mother of Aenys Targaryen,
yes,
and Visenya is the mother of Maegor. So that's where we're at. So both of them, each of them had a son, and here's where we stand. So Aegon the Conqueror had 2 sons. Aenys, we mentioned this last week, but I just think it's important to remind us where we are when we talk about Maegor the Cruel. He had basically lost control of the realm, lost control of the realm, and there were uprisings. There were lots of fights, infighting going on, people challenging the dragon, and Maegor at that time had been banished to Essos.
Yeah.
And he had been banished because, he had a secret wedding that the High Septon and those guys did not like. They were completely against. So really, it does come into, when you talk about Maegor and Aenys, it is their war or their disputes with the faith, right, and the faith militant. So yeah, okay. What else you got?
All right. Well, it says here. So I guess I'll talk about that. So no sooner had Aenys been buried than Visenya mounted Vhagar and flew east to Pentos to recall her son Maegor to the 7 kingdoms. Following his exile, Maegor flew back across the Narrow Sea with Balerion, staying at Dragonstone for long enough to be crowned with his father's Valyrian steel crown instead of his brother's more ornate one. Grand Maester Gawain protested, noting that the laws of inheritance. Prince Aegon, I guess it would have been King Aenys, eldest son.
Yep.
Should be king. Maegor's response to declare the maester a traitor, sentence him to death, and take his head with a single swing of Blackfire. After that, few others dared to support Aegon's claim. Ravens flew, declaring that a new king had been crowned, one who would treat his loyal supporters justly and bring a traitor's death to those who opposed him.
Yeah, so this is a good point to kind of discuss. Aegon the Conqueror, no problem in who's going to succeed him. He has 2 sons. He has an elder son, Aenys, and a younger son, Maegor. And so, the firstborn son is next up. Now, if Aenys has no children, Maegor is next in line.
Right.
And there's a problem here. Aenys does have, a child. And I think he was with Alisa, what's her name, of Valerion.
Mm-hmm.
Is that his, yeah, I can't remember. It was, but it was his wife. They were basically cousins, I think. He had no sister wife to marry, so he married a cousin who was of the Valerian descent, I guess.
Right. Yeah, I actually have. So this is actually part of what we'll be hitting up in the Black Council. This is actually from the book "The Sons of the Dragon." So this is kind of a longer passage. If you're ready for me to
get a taste of it
to dive in here. Let me just zoom in since I'm becoming blind and need glasses. The accord between the Faith and the Iron Throne continued all through the reign of Aegon the First, from 11 AC to 37 AC. 6 High Septons wore the Crystal Crown. His Grace remained on good terms with each of them, calling at the Starry Sept each time he came to Old Town. Yet the question of incestuous marriage remained, simmering below the courtesies like poison. Aegon the Conqueror had fathered no daughters. However, so these matters did not come to a head at once. The sons of the Dragon had no sisters to marry, so each of them was forced to seek elsewhere for a bride. Prince Aenys, who later becomes King Aenys, we talked about last week, was the first to marry. In 22 AC, he wed the Lady Alyssa, the maiden daughter of the Lord of the Tides.
There you go.
Aethan Valerion, King Aegon's Lord Admiral and Master of Ships. She was 15, the same age as the prince, and shared his silvery hair and purple eyes as well. For the Valerians were of ancient families descended from Valyrian stock. King Aegon's own mother had been a Valerian, so the marriage was reckoned one of cousin to cousin.
Yep.
The following year, this is I got a long passage here unless you want to jump in and say something.
No, I mean, just really quickly, I guess that well, no, go ahead and finish it, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
The following year, Alyssa gave birth to a daughter. Aenys named her Rhaenyra. Prince Aenys was the heir to the Iron Throne, all agreed, but now an issue arose as to whether Prince Maegor remained second in line of succession or should be considered to have fallen to a third.
When also, real quick before you get, Rhaena Targaryen, the Targaryens are open to there being a queen.
Yes.
Okay, so at first they have a daughter. And so if Maegor, which you're about to get to, is betrothed to Rhaena Targaryen, his brother's daughter, then that would up him in that line, of succession. So, but really, they had to decide here whether we're going to have a queen or not. are we going to pass by the daughters to go to the first sons? You know,
And something I brought up, I guess it just kind of depends, because I think it should also kind of be viewed is that Aegon the Conqueror marries both of his sisters, but he marries one and then marries the other. So he marries Visenya first. So Visenya is his first wife, and Visenya is also older than Aegon. And Rhaenys is younger than Aegon, but Rhaenys is who he has his first son with, which is God, there's so many different names. Aenys Targaryen. Yeah. So Aenys Targaryen, who ends up becoming the king. So I think that also maybe could cause, well, Maegor is the son of his first wife as opposed to the son of his second wife.
Right. And what's crazy is, they have to kind of figure this out because
the realms never had anything like this. Their laws are pretty strict.
Right. And also at the time, the Targaryens are not kings of anything, really. Right. They're just these ancient Valyrian house that's on Dragonstone, and they just decided to look west and conquer it. So they really have a chance here to kind of figure out how it goes. So Queen Visenya actually does, nothing is set in stone. It's up to them to decide what the laws will be and how the succession is going to work. So this is kind of important.
Yeah. So behind the newborn princess, Queen Visenya proposed to settle the matter by betrothing Rhaenyra to Maegor, who had just turned 12. Aenys and Alyssa spoke out against the match. The High Septim also spoke out against the union of Maegor and Rhaenyra. He, the Septim, proposed a different bride for Maegor, Cerys, Hightower, maiden daughter to the Lord of Oldtown, and also the High Septim's own niece, which we talked about last week.
Yeah.
Convenient. King Aegon, mindful of the advantages of closer ties with Oldtown and its ruling house, saw wisdom in the choice and agreed to the match.
Yeah. And so, because King Aegon the Conqueror here, was very close and with Oldtown. He appeased them. They liked him. They supported him. But as you said earlier, this incestual marriage situation, they didn't like it. But they didn't say anything to Aegon the Conqueror because he had unite. He was doing well. The small folk supported him. All this good stuff. Now, nothing. They weren't even opposed to Aenys marrying, like his cousin, a Valyrian. It was when this proposal by Visenya to Maegor and Aenys' first daughter, Rhaena, that we have a problem because that's basically marrying his niece. You know what I mean? She would be marrying her uncle, and so they had a problem with that, and that's where there's a bit of an issue here. And they decide, King Aegon, this other match, Cerys Hightower is put forward by the High Septim, and he says, sure, yep, that's what we're going to go with. So that is Maegor's first wife. It's a lot to get to his first wife, but I think it's important to understand all the drama behind it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it talks in the Book of the Dragon that Aenys has a handful of kids, and Maegor, we'll get to it here in a second, struggles having heirs.
Yep.
And so as Aenys has more kids, that just pushes Maegor down and down and down the line. And something else it mentions in the book of, or the Sons of the Dragon in the Book of Swords, it talks, something I just found interesting is that it talks that Aegon the Conqueror had put the sword Blackfire in the hands of Aenys a handful of times, but he gives Maegor Blackfire, the sword.
Yeah.
And then again, here we are in a somewhat similar situation to later, hearing the Dunk and Egg stories and stuff like that, the Blackfire Rebellion, which we talked about, where you have Daemon and Daeron. So you have Daemon Blackfire,
right,
who was a legitimate bastard because Aegon IV legitimizes all of his bastards, and he has the sword Blackfire, and the one I think a lot of people looked at were like, he's more kingly as opposed to Daeron, who is more bookish. And then you have Maegor, who is far more of a knight and worthy, and he has the sword Blackfire as opposed to Aenys. So it's just, the whole thing is just, it's interesting. It's that you draw those comparisons. And so here we go back into A World of Ice and Fire. It was said that Aenys was an adequate sword and lance, capable enough not to disgrace himself, but little more. Maegor, on the other hand, was defeating hardened knights in the melee when he was all of 13 and 10. And quickly won renown in the royal tourney of 28 AC. when he defeated 3 knights of the Kingsguard at 13 years old. So that's pretty legit.
Yep.
In succession of the list, and went on to win the melee. He was knighted by King Aegon at 16 and 10, the youngest knight in the realm at that time.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So he's very good.
So maybe he did it when he was 16.
Did what?
So maybe he was just beating knights when he was 13, and then won the tourney at 28 AC when he was 16.
Possibly, yeah.
So he beat 3 members. He beat 3 members of the Kingsguard in this tourney. And remember, Barristan Selmy beats at 16 Sir Duncan the Tall, who was then a member of the Kingsguard at 16. So
yeah, and actually
same kind of a thing. So
Right.
Maegor may have even been more beastly on the field.
Oh, he might have been. Yeah. Well, than who?
Barristan Selmy.
Than Barristan Selmy?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, seriously.
We just don't know enough about him.
Right. Yeah, and we'll get into that later in Black Council. We'll talk a little bit more about what he did, because he also, when you have Balerion, you know, the Dread, you don't really need to get off of him and fight hand to hand. So you'll see that,
which is something that another podcast jacked up.
Exactly.
When they said that Aegon the Conqueror was a great warrior, although the book says he's pretty good, but it's mostly his dragons.
Yeah. So we won't mention that podcast, but yeah. So anyways, he's definitely a warrior, and he's worthy of maybe us reconsidering our list. You know? Sir Matt and I are working on our list.
I'm sure our list is going to be demolished with fire and blood. So
I'm sure it is. Yeah. So now let's get into more about just like his reign, I guess.
Yeah.
In 37 AC, his father King Aegon I dies, and then King Aenys takes over, which we talked about. And basically, there's this lot of dissension, a lot of stuff going on. I guess first you have to talk about his exile, because he is married. He is married to what's her name? I just lost it. Oh gosh, not Cerise. Anyways, he ends up marrying Alice Haraway, and that's like this secret marriage that basically it is Cerise Hightower. Yeah, he and Cerise still had no children, and so this whole time he's been begrudgingly, I think, in this marriage with Cerise. Although it does say in the Sons of the Dragon that on the night that he consummated the marriage or whatever, that he was like super lustful and had consummated it 12 times over or whatever, and things. So they definitely tried, and they weren't able to have children. So he, in secret, takes another wife, Alice Haraway, and basically, I think the Septon declares that says it's wrong. It was done in secret, and then he's exiled. Is that right? Mm-hmm. He'd been down.
Yeah, you have to go back a chapter. I actually talked about it here. So this is from the previous chapter, Aenys. Maegor shocked the realm in 31 AC by announcing he had taken a second wife, Elise of House Haraway, in secret. He had wed her in a Valyrian ceremony officiated by Queen Visenya for want of a Septon willing to wed them. The public outcry was such that Aenys was finally forced to exile his brother. Yeah, so...
Okay. All right, so he's exiled, he's chilling out there, and all that craziness is going on there. So now, how do we get into his reign? He's sent back, and he just
takes the throne by force, pretty much, and then his reign kind of begins. And so once he comes back and just kills the High Septon and pretty much makes himself king, nobody questions it, and so then it just kind of starts. So then we get into right here. Visenya then challenged any who denied Maegor's right to rule to prove themselves, and the captain of the warriors' sons accepted the challenge. Sir Daemon Morgan, called Daemon the Devout, agreed to a trial of 7 after the ancient fashion. Sir Daemon and 6 warrior sons against the king and his 6 champions. It was a contest which the kingdom itself was at stake, and the accounts and tales are many and often contradictory. What we do know is that King Maegor was the last man left standing, but that he took a grievous blow to the head and at the very end fell senseless to the ground just moments after the last of the warrior sons died. For 27 days, Maegor was dead to the world. On the 28th, Queen Alice arrived from Pentos, and with her came a Pentoshi Belushi called Tiana of the Tower. She had become Maegor's lover during his exile, it was clear, and some whispered Queen Alyssa as well. And then basically she cares for him alone, and then he wakes up, on the 13th day since the trial of 7.
Yeah. So that was so basically, I guess, had he put away his first wife, because that's Elise Haraway.
Yeah, it unfortunately it's not this, and then there's actually like a little sub chapter at the end of this about his wives, and it's kind of really unclear exactly to what all he did. It seems like he has a ton of them.
Yeah, he does. He definitely does. So let me see. Cerise died in 45 AC, and it looks like let's see, King Aenys in the year 42. So King Aenys dies in 42 AC, and Maegor is obviously called back to Westeros.
Yeah, so he has Cerise of House Hightower, who he marries in 25 AC. She dies in 45 AC. He has Alyssa of House Haraway, that's the secret one, that he has in 39 AC, while Maegor was the hand, and this is what gets him exiled. Tiana of the Tower, who he marries, must be over in Essos. She's wed to the king in 42 AC.
Right, so she's wed to the king in 42 AC, and that is when I think that in the same year is when he comes back to Westeros.
Yep.
So I guess I think perhaps that Cerise was still there, but she was sickly, and she ends up dying in 45. So she ends up dying, what is that, 3 years later? You know? So he had 3 wives at that time.
Yeah.
When he came back,
and then at one point he marries 3 women all at once. So
exactly,
yeah. So
but it's just important. Those first 3 are kind of hard.
More of the important ones.
Yeah, and they're more, legitimate, I guess.
Yeah. So anyway, so after he has this trial of 7 where his claim to the throne was challenged, he mounts Balerion, flies to Aegon's High Hill, in the hill of Rhaenys without warning, and unleashes Balerion's fire on the Sept of Remembrance. And then has, archers and spearmen, cut down, people that are running out there. So this is really where his kind of war against the 7 and the High Sept kind of begins.
Right, and so
the Faith Militant.
Yeah, the Faith Militant and the Poor Fellows, they call them. So they basically had armed themselves, and that's something that you in the main series, to make a connection, that is the warriors' sons, and the Faith Militant,
but
right?
Cersei,
doesn't want to come necessarily back into power, but Tommen, kind of brings him back. Yeah. So, which is an interesting, thing. I mean, it's just, and so we'll get into that more later, because there's actually a lot of little uprisings that take place with all of that. So, okay. And it goes on to talk about, the battle at Stonebridge. The poor fellows fell in droves, and it said that the Mandor ran red with the blood of 20 leagues. So it mentions several of these little battles at different places. An even greater battle was joined at the Great Fork of the Blackwater. So 13,000 poor fellows, as well as hundreds of knights from chapters of the warriors' sons at Stony Sept, and hundreds more, besides, from like rebel lords and stuff, basically get together and they're trying to put down, Maegor the Cruel, essentially. Yeah. So, and I think it has to do with he has multiple wives. He's seeking an incestual marriage as well, and the succession did not pass down to, through Aenys' children, and that's the big problem, is that it didn't pass down through the right people.
Right.
So,
right, yeah, and then King Maegor struggles not only with the Faith, militant. He struggles to have his own heir, and that's kind of why it's kind of like King Henry VIII a little bit. Maybe that's where Gur was drawing some inspiration, for him, and that he's marrying all these women trying to have an heir, and he can't do it, so he's like, killing them, or just, kind of crazy guy. So here, Maegor's war, this is talking about the Faith Militant, and then it kind of goes into his marriages here. Maegor's wars against them were further compounded by his many marriages, as he strove to produce an heir. Yet no matter how many women he wedded or bedded, he found himself childless. He made brides of women who he had widowed, women of proved fertility, but the only children bore of his seed proved monstrosities, misshapen, eyeless, limbless, or having the parts of man and woman both.
Can I just say that it sounds like the seed is not strong?
Not.
Is that what I'm hearing?
Not strong here.
It's not strong. Something's up.
Yeah, his descent into true madness, some say, began with the first of these abominations. So then it kind of shifts over, and it starts to talk about his one true distinction, which is Maegor's Holdfast, which is the completion of the Red Keep. Yeah,
and that's interesting because we know that, and we know this from the main series, that after it's completed, right, they get all of the builders and the workers, people who had worked on it, knew the secret passageways and the false walls and all that stuff, and they are killed.
It says right here, but as was typical with Maegor's reign, even this great achievement was turned to horror. When the keep was at last completed, the king threw a righteous feast for the masons and carvers and other craftsmen who had helped to construct the castle. But after 3 days at the king's expense, they were all put to the sword so that the secrets of the Red Keep would be to Maegor's alone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that's actually going to be our cool connection, is kind of looking a little bit more into the Red Keep. So I might actually kind of pull up some of that now, because I think there is actually some pretty cool stuff about the castle itself.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
So Aegon, we know that Aegon starts building the castle. It starts out kind of as the Aegon fort. It's on Aegon's hill, and then that essentially he starts creating the castle. So you have Maegor's Holdfast, which is a massive square fortress inside the heart of the Red Keep. So you have like the main castle, and then he kind of adds this fortress inside of the Red Keep itself. Has walls 12 feet thick and a dry moat lined with iron spikes. I think that's kind of where you see like the spikes that they have that Ned Stark's head's on, and Joffrey's talking about it. It was a castle within a castle. The royal apartments are in Maegor's Holdfast. The king's bedchamber has twin hearths. There's also like the queen's ballroom. And it talks about it not being as big. It's not as big as like the small hall in the Tower of the Hand. The ballroom seats 100 and has beaten 7, or has a bunch of silver mirrors in it and stuff like that. You have the Tower of the Hand, which we see a lot. Tower has tall windows. Behind the tower, below the tower is a chamber of the dragon mosaic. There's a lot of different things in here. You have the Maiden Vault. Baelor 1 confined his sisters there when he came to the throne, claiming it would prevent any
you wouldn't touch him
thoughts. So just a lot of weird things. You have the White Sword Tower, which is the chamber of the King's Guard.
Mm-hmm.
The Great Hall, which is the Rome. It says that the hall can sit 1,000 people. So
I believe it, because
a lot bigger in the books.
Yeah, bigger in the books.
Yeah.
Oh, bigger in the book. Sorry.
Bigger in books. Way bigger.
Absolutely.
In the show, it looks like maybe 100, but that's fine. I mean,
and imagine they had the
all
skulls
the dragon skulls in there.
Yeah.
There's the Traitor's Walk, a half-round tower that contains the entrance to the dungeons. The top floor holds the cells for the prisoners who were to be kept in degree of comfort. So just kind of some different things there. Then you have the dungeon, and there's a bunch of secret passages all over the place, which is why Maegor has people killed. But Maegor wants no rats in his own walls, except for one secret escape door that does not connect to any other passage in the Red Keep. Then there's a God's Wood in there, a sept, a rookery, and things like that. And then there's some cool quotes just from the books. If you go to the wiki's great. It has all these kinds of things. The Red Keep has ways known only to ghosts and spiders.
Yes.
Because Varys seems to know quite a few of them. And then Jaime Lannister says, no one knows the Red Keep better than the eunuch. Talking about Lord Varys. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, it would make sense since he's a Targaryen, right?
Could be.
Whoa!
Certainly a Targaryen loyalist, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, cool. So that was cool. That was that's pretty neat. And I guess to go along with that, the Hill of Remembrance, Rhaenys, hill where he destroys a lot of the Faith Militant and their bones and their ashes, all that stuff is up there. He raises, like he tears that down, raises it, and that's where the dragon pit is constructed. Actually,
yes, that's where he constructs the dragon pit.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool. And he had a hard time finding, builders, right? Do you have that?
Yeah. Let me. Oh gosh, maybe I didn't highlight.
I got it.
I didn't highlight it here.
Yeah. So let's see. In their place, he decreed a great stone stable for dragons would be erected, a lair worthy of Balerion. Thus, commenced the building of the dragon pit. Perhaps unsurprisingly, it proved difficult to find builders, stonemasons, and laborers to work the project. So many men ran off that the king was finally forced to use prisoners from the city's dungeons as his workforce. So, it just makes sense that that was, you killed everybody, so it's going to be hard to kind of... And really with the dragon pit, there's not much secrecy to it. It's just a pit, but still it just shows you how people feared... Maegor, and he was crazy. He was cruel.
Well, it could also be that, and could also be fearing dragons, because they want the dragon pit where these dragons can hang out, and
right.
It's like, I don't want to be part of that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I don't want to be anywhere near dragons, especially with this guy. So.
Right. Okay, so let's get back to this real quick, and let's finish up sort of what happens here in the midst of his rule. He has all the issues with the poor fellows and the Faith Militant, but then arises Aegon Targaryen, who is Aenys, his brother's son, so his nephew, rises and takes Quicksilver. There's the battle at the God's Eye, and Balerion with Maegor. They make short work of it and end up killing. Aegon believes that he has the right, to make a claim for the throne, and that he should have never been passed over. Because he's Aenys' first son, and so, actually to tie this bit up here. One of the other reasons why Aenys and the High Septon had some issues is because Aegon married his sister Rhaena, and Rhaena Targaryen, and they had 2 kids, 2 twins, I believe. I think it was twin daughters. I could be wrong about that. And that was who Visenya was trying to betroth to Maegor. So Aegon has married what would have been the betrothed of Maegor, and he meets him on the battlefield with Quicksilver and is killed, and doesn't make it.
Yeah. So, and one quick thing about the name Aegon, because this was confusing me. I was like, wait, I thought there was an Aegon II. So you don't really claim that like Aegon V, Aegon VI, right? That kind of a thing, unless you are king. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that was very confusing to me. So I was like, wait a second. I thought Aegon II was a king, and he has his own sigil. It's like a yellow dragon or something.
Yes,
right. Yeah, he does.
He does.
So this Aegon is not
right.
Yeah, you only get the distinction, like Aegon the First, Aegon the Second, once you become the king.
Yeah. So to make it easier for you to understand, you've got technically you have 5 Aegon kings. Mm-hmm. You've got Aegon the Fifth, and then backwards, and outside of that, you might have 12 Aegons.
Yeah,
I think it's probably less than 12. I think
it might be more.
It might be more. Who knows?
More.
I haven't counted them
all.
Well,
because theoretically, right now in the books, you have Aegon, who was Rhaegar's son, but he never becomes king, so he's just an Aegon. And then you have Jon Snow, who in the show, who is also Aegon,
right?
And so he may also be,
yeah. So just to make that distinction. That's why I keep going back to kind of explain where they descended from, so you've got Aegon the Conqueror, who had Aenys, who was Aenys I, and then he had a son, Aegon, who would have been the next king, but Maegor is flown back in and takes over. So then, Aegon meets him on the battlefield, killed his sister Rhaena, moves on with their twins, and So now, Aenys though, Maegor's brother, had a wife, right? And they still have other kids. Mm-hmm. And one of those kids is Prince Viserys. Is that right? Viserys?
Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And he is basically taken after Aegon's little move at the battle of the near the the Battle of the God's Eye.
Yeah. Well, what ends up happening though is that Queen Visenya dies in 44 AC, and when she dies, Queen Alyssa, who was Aenys' wife, takes away with all of her children, with the exception of Viserys, and even steals Dark Sister, the Valyrian steel sword, and flies. I think she flies to Dragonstone, doesn't she?
Slipped away from Dragonstone.
Slipped away from Dragonstone with her children. So she goes like Essos.
And she could not, because Viserys was actually at King's Landing with his uncle, Maegor the Cruel. And so since he's there, and she has slipped away with her other 2 children and Dark Sister, because Visenya was at Dragonstone, I think she might even go to the Free Cities. I'm not even sure.
Yeah, it does say
in the Sons of the Dragon. So we'll check there.
And so So then she leaves Viserys there, and Viserys basically dies, and Maegor leaves him out in the middle of, the middle, I guess, of the yard or something, so that to kind of
he displays him. I mean, it's bait, because he wants her to come back with the other Targaryen children, because it's just he's worried about another uprising, and this is where we're going to get into all of these people start to kind of betray him, and Jaehaerys the First is actually ultimately the one who will come back, rally a bunch of supporters, and take down his uncle.
Yeah, and that's really what happens next in the thing. Prince Jaehaerys, Aenys, and Alyssa's only remaining son, now all of 14 years of age and supported by the Lords of Storm's End, whom Jaehaerys had named as protector of the realm and hand of the king, when Queen Rhaenyra, whom Maegor had married after Aegon's death, learned of her brother's proclamation, she flew on her dragon, Dreamfire, stealing Blackfire away as her king and husband slept. Even 2 of the king's guard abandoned Maegor, joining Jaehaerys instead. And then it just seems like Maegor, I think he's just kind of psychologically beat with all of this stuff. His mom dies, you can't have an heir, all of this stuff. Maegor's response to this was as slow as confused as it seemed, that this series of betrayals and perhaps even the loss of his mother's guidance had left him in the own way as broken as Aenys. Remember, when Aenys dies, it's the same kind of a thing. He said he's kind of perceives himself as a nice guy.
Yeah.
And he's wondering why do people not like me?
Right. Why are they rebelling against me? And what do I do? Is he
right? He just doesn't know what to do. It's interesting if you look at both of them and you look at both their parents. You have Maegor, whose mom is Visenya, who we know is very militant, she's
calculating,
right, and then you have Rhaenys, who it seems like Aegon loved a little more, because she's more of a free spirit,
right,
kind of a thing, and so
yeah.
But
anyways, I mean, to end all of that, Jaehaerys basically, they kill him.
Well, we don't really know.
Well, we do in the Sons of the Dragon, I think. So.
Well, in the World of Ice and Fire, it says, it was late at night during the hour of the wolf when the remaining lords departed in the council chamber, leaving Maegor to brood alone. Early the next morning, he was found dead on the throne, his robes sodden with blood, his arms slashed open by the barbs of the Iron Throne.
So this is another plug for the Black Council, because when we get there, it is pretty cool. You can almost put your thumb on about, at least I have my thumb on one person who did it.
Yeah.
And I think you'll be able to kind of make your own case as to who you think it was that killed Maegor the Cruel, etc. So, but anyways, yeah, it was all of that suffocation that was going on with the different lords rallying to his cause. And so, thus ends the reign of Maegor the Cruel. So,
yeah, and so then next week we'll be hitting up Jaehaerys the First, who I will say a plug for. A lot of people believe in the books, if R plus L does equal J, that Jon Snow's actual name will be Jaehaerys.
Jaehaerys, yeah, I could see that for sure.
Yeah.
So anyways, there's a lot of stuff in there. We only just hit the cliff notes, so as you can imagine, the Black Council episode might be 2 episodes. So we'll see how that goes.
There's also a Patreon time limit. So
yeah, there's a time limit for it. So we might have to divide it up, but. But anyways, there it is. There's just the cliff notes. We'll circle back to it each week, as you can kind of see. Sir Matt and I are going to kind of comb back through several chapters to remind you and pull you along this line of thought here, because the Targaryen kings is very confusing, and there's a lot of names to remember. So we're gonna try to do our best to help.
We were
with that.
reading. We were doing. We were just combing over some stuff last night, and we were looking and you look at almost like the end of the Dunk and Egg series. There's a lot of unaccounted for Targaryens.
Absolutely, there are. Yeah,
a ton of them.
Right.
Like we're kind of to believe that only one of these guys may be alive with like Daenerys, and no, I don't think so.
Right.
There's tons not accounted for.
Exactly.
That could still be alive.
Well, then you also have House Valerion, which is still a player, and that's why I believe Fire and Blood it has the second volume, and I think that will cover. So we're told actually in Fire and Blood that it covers between Aegon the First and I think Aegon the Third. So that's a lot, and around this, the Dance of Dragons is in all of that. So 3 really confusing period. The Conquest. If we think this is confusing, just wait till we get to a Dance of Dragons. Or I think and then which is where the Black Council was actually formed, and then when we get to Aegon the Fourth,
oh god,
I mean it's literally it's gonna be bonkers. So we want to try to have a good grasp on what's happening there, because as I said earlier, the connection I'm going to make in the Black Council is that some of the names and the people and the wives and the brides here are very much big players later on.
Absolutely.
And when you see houses pitted against one another, it's because of marriages and alliances to the Targaryens, over 200 years ago.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And a lot of this, especially these marriages and things, especially once you kind of get to like Aegon the Fourth, I think are all going to kind of come back to play in like Winds of Winter, because that's kind of the whole Blackfire Rebellion stuff with young Griff and all this stuff, and it's all going to be, when Winds finally releases, it's all going to have a lot to do, I think, with a lot of this stuff. So,
Yep. Okay, I think it's time to dive into the reread. As I said, this week we are into Tyrion 2, and so we'll jump into that. But first, let's do a quick recap just on the last chapter, which was Eddard.
Eddard 2.
Eddard 2.
Yeah. So last week we have Robert Baratheon waking Ned up early, and they ride out into just kind of the woods into the north, and just doing some riding, and then they have a conversation about Daenerys Targaryen over in Essos marrying a Dothraki lord, and
Right.
Robert and Ned kind of have an argument, I think is the way to put it, and then they kind of just put it off for now, really. And then they talk a little bit about possibly Jaime Lannister as the Warden of the East.
Yeah. Yes.
And so just kind of some political back and forth between Ned and
you get
Robert.
some history too of basically what happened, back in the day. There's a lot of historical references made and stuff. So yeah. All right. So in Tyrion 2, summary for that: Tyrion Lannister travels north with Benjen Stark and Jon Snow. Tyrion is impressed by the overwhelming size of the North. Along the way, they meet Yoren of the Night's Watch, and as they pass the Wolf's Wood, one particular night, Tyrion goes off to read and is discovered by Jon Snow. They have a very candid discussion about life on the Wall, and I think Jon Snow has to kind of face some hard truths. So there's your summary. Let's dive into some of the details. We have divided this chapter in 3 parts. We've got the journey north. Why do you read? Dragon dreams, Grumkins, and Snarks.
Yep.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah. So the journey north, it's just kind of when Tyrion and Jon are riding north, and you kind of get just a bit of the lay of the land of the north and how it kind of goes towards the wall, which I think is kind of interesting in that it talks about how the King's Road kind of, gets a little more beaten down.
Right. It kind of narrows.
It kind of narrows down, and the woods kind of start to get thicker. And
well, yeah, and here's how in my head, how you get a picture when you're reading just of the descriptions and things. So to our west, I believe, is the Wolf's Wood, right? And then so to our right, it kind of slopes down. So I believe they said to the east it sloped down, and then to the west was the Wolf's Wood. So you imagine you're almost like the road is sort of cutting along the edge of the woods there for a little while. And you've got a couple of different for a 3 days ride at least. There's some taverns, some rude inns that they can stay in. 3+ days maybe, and I think that's a good thing. But then once they get beyond that, really, it's they're kind of out in the open. Not a whole lot to really, protect them.
Yeah, like it's actually, I always kind of forget exactly where Winterfell is, because every time I think about Winterfell, I think it's like, well, it's like right next to the wall. Well, it's really not. Actually, it's not right next to the wall. It's actually, it looks like it's definitely a couple days, or perhaps like a week's ride up to the wall.
Well, and you also got to remember too that you've got all that gift territory in between, Winterfell or the north and the wall, which is basically used by the Night's Watch to, just use for resources and things as they might need it. So, all right. So, as they're going past the Wolf's Wood, Benjen is talking to Tyrion a little bit here, and they talk about they hear actually the wolves howling in the Wolf's Wood, and they make a special note here that Ghost, Jon's direwolf, doesn't make a sound at all. He doesn't call back to him. He's just it's eerie how silent he is, and perceptive, and just intelligent that this direwolf is. So they said there was something very unsettling about that animal, Tyrion thought. So now they were 8 in the party, not including the wolf. Tyrion traveled with 2 of his own men, as befit a Lannister. So he has two men accompanying him because he's not going to make his own tent. He's not going to pitch his own tent or what have you. So they are just there to kind of protect him, make sure everything goes well, and what have you. And so they meet Yoren, though. Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
Okay. One of the Black brothers, and
who's something interesting here about Yoren is like you don't think he's he's just some guy. Well, he comes back and it's kind of a
bigger deal.
Big deal, yeah.
Right. Yeah, and he seems kind of grumpy here while he's out on the road. And I think, when he gets back to, at least especially in the show too, they really depict him as more of a happy-go-lucky drinking type of guy, having a good time.
Because he's the guy that rides south, tells Ned later that Benjen's gone missing, tells him that Tyrion's been taken, and then he's also the one that like cuts Arya's hair, and I'm going to take you back to Winterfell and to the north,
right? Yep.
And then he dies, but.
Yeah. So, anyways, these guys make a curious, fellowship for the King's Road. You've got some rapers that they're taking back to the Night's Watch, and that's really Jon gets a good look at his new brothers.
Right here. No doubt the boy had made a mistake of thinking that the Night's Watch was made up of men like his uncle. If so, Yoren and his companions were a rude awakening. Tyrion felt sorry for the boy. He had chosen a hard life, or perhaps he should say that a hard life had been chosen for him.
Right, and right there just goes back into all the theories we talked about. Between did Benjen? We had a raven the other day where someone was kind of like just had popped in and started listening to the podcast and said, said yes. 100%.
Yeah, so a patron posted to our older
had
been up for a bit. Yeah, post. He's like, sorry, I'm late, but absolutely.
Absolutely to the fact that Ned Stark shared Jon's true identity and was a part of, shared that with Benjen Stark, and that those two together are working towards creating a life for Jon Snow.
Yeah, and something interesting we've been kind of taking a note of when we're researching all these theories is that you can't ever. POV is everything. The point of view of which character is experiencing whose chapter it is everything. Because if this were Jon's chapter, as we'll get to, they're having this back and forth conversation, could be totally different. But how it's perceived. That's why I have no idea. But when we finally get to the dragon pit that we saw on the show, whose POV is it going to be?
Right, because you have so many main characters.
And
it might not be that way.
Not be that way,
but that would be an interesting one where it's like, from whose perspective are we?
Because it changes everything.
Yeah, it definitely does. Because imagine if this were told from Jon's point of view here, it'd be very more somber. It would be he'd be a little down, just I don't know, disheartened.
Just because,
because he's realizing slowly that like this is not going the way he thought it was going to go. It'd be a very different tone here. So. But it's not. It's told from Tyrion's point of view, and so after he kind of introduces to the company, talks about what's going on. He had so talking about this life that had been chosen for Jon. Tyrion starts to kind of feel bad for Jon. You know, Benjen knew what this was like, and Ned Stark knew what this was like. And that happened, they'll talk about that later, is like everyone knows these things, but no one really has told him the truth. And Tyrion does later in this chapter.
Mm-hmm.
All right, what do you got?
It's just something else, just interesting here. So then they start making camp. And so just something I thought was kind of interesting. This is where you start to get into the conversation between, like, why do you read? Jon and Tyrion go back and forth. With Lord Eddard Stark's permission, Tyrion had borrowed a few rare volumes from the Winterfell library and packed them for the ride north. First of all, I just find that interesting because there's a conversation that we don't see in the show, we don't see in the books. But these are the kind of things I think when you think about the show where you get these kind of conversations. This is what I mean when I say a lot, well, the book may reference something and then the show may do it.
Right. Yes,
so not that happens, but that is a scenario that we could see in the show that theoretically could.
Yeah, that could have happened, right? There could have been a quick conversation like, you know,
hey, can I borrow this book?
Lord Stark, do you care if I borrow? No, take it. You know what I mean? Like,
which is also funny because something else I thought about this line. I'm going to go down some deep rabbit holes here.
That's fine.
It's just interesting because you think of Lord Stark as like, he doesn't care about books. He's somebody who uses a sword. And Tyrion talks about that. Like, I can't use a sword. I have to use books. But it's Lord Eddard Stark who actually kind of turns to books at the end of this, and Tyrion who actually kind of turns to a sword. Remember, they're raided by the what are they called? The
clans.
The clans.
Yeah.
And he has to fight. He kind of actually fights one of them and kills one of them. And so it's just I just thought it was interesting. Also, those library fees have got to be outrageous because he had to turn those books in.
He did not take those back.
Well, maybe he does. Maybe he does when he goes back.
He might have.
When he goes back.
We'll see.
I
have a feeling he kept them.
He probably kept them.
So now one thing too.
Well, Lannister always pays his debt, so.
Right. So they'll eventually get back there. Another thing that's interesting is as they're going north, Benjen really wanted to make it hard. He wanted to kind of make this, he doesn't really like Lannisters, and they didn't have a real good taste in their mouth. I'm wondering if Benjen, I know there was, in the books, there's really no conversation between the two of them, correct? But I bet that there was. It's one of those things we didn't see, right? And, there's a bad taste in their mouth in regards to the Lannisters. And it wouldn't surprise me if Ned had mentioned something to Benjen about it, but who knows? So anyways, Tyrion's hardened. He's riding a lot. Legs are cramping. He's getting chafed, etc. So this was kind of cool. Benjen Stark trying to mock Tyrion, like, oh, would you in mocking courtesy, like ask him, would you like my bearskin cloak, etc. And Tyrion's like, oh yeah, I mean, hell yeah, I'll take it, And I think he thought. Benjen thought that Tyrion wouldn't take it because he was going to try to show that he was tough and hard, and Tyrion's like, I don't really care. It's freezing out here. Yeah, I'll take your cloak. And then Benjen ends up like, Tyrion believes anyways that he regrets it, So I just thought that was kind of funny. That just shows you more of Tyrion's nature. He's more than willing to surprise you, and he's not above admitting that he's either wrong or that he's weak or that he's not trying to be these big, bold, strong knights who wield swords and stuff. Yeah. He's very clear about that in this chapter.
Yeah. So then Tyrion starts reading the book. And actually it's a lot of stuff we've already kind of covered. It's just kind of a little bit kind of about like Aegon's conquest a little bit.
Did you the Dragonbone stuff?
Yeah, we'll jump into that. Yeah. Okay. So Tyrion curled up with his back against the trunk, took a sip of wine, and began to read about the properties of Dragonbone. Dragonbone is black because of its high iron content, the book told him. It is as strong as steel, yet lighter and far more flexible, and of course utterly impervious to fire. Dragonbone bows are greatly prized by the Dothraki and small wonder. An archer so armed can outrange any wooden bow.
Right, and so if you recall earlier, when Dany receives her gifts from, Khal Drogo's blood riders, one of them gives her a dragon bone bow, and that of course is given to Khal Drogo, because she's not gonna use that, but it's pretty cool. She actually puts it on the fire later, and it doesn't burn, I don't think. Right. So, but it's also cool that it's black, right? So I always imagine like the dragon skulls being white or whatever, white like bone, and they're not necessarily. Actually, we talk about that here in a second, I think.
Right. Yeah. So then it goes on. This is the biggest kind of Tyrion is a Targaryen. This is like what everyone points to is this chapter.
Mm-hmm.
Tyrion had a morbid fascination with dragons. When he had first come to King's Landing for his sister's wedding to Robert Baratheon, he had made it a point to seek out the dragon skulls that had hung on the walls of the Targaryen throne room. King Robert had replaced them with banners and tapestries, but Tyrion had persisted until he found the skulls in the dark cellar where they had been stored. He had expected to find them impressive, perhaps even frightening. He had not thought to find them beautiful, yet they were. As black as onyx, polished smooth so the bones seemed to shimmer in the light of his torch. They liked the fire, he sensed. He'd thrust the torch into the mouth of one of the larger skulls and make the shadow leap and dance on the wall behind them. The teeth were long, curving knives of black diamond. The flame of the torch was nothing to them. They had bathed in the heat and far greater fires. When he had moved away, Tyrion could have sworn the beast's empty eye sockets had watched him go. There were 19 skulls, the oldest more than 3,000 years old, which is interesting because, like, when we kind of think of dragons, I think we think like, oh, like 300. Aegon, right? 300. Right. So yeah, so these are 3,000. So these could actually even be dragons from other places outside of Valyria. Like Valyria.
Yeah. They could have been, but I also think perhaps that the Targaryens either brought with them, that might have been something that they brought with them as a skull like this, or it was something that later on during their reign people brought them these skulls.
Shipped him. I think that's kind of more likely. The most recent were also the smallest, a matched pair no bigger than mastiff skulls and oddly misshapen. All that remained of the last two hatchlings born on Dragonstone. They were the last of the Targaryen dragons, perhaps the last dragons anywhere, and they had not lived very long. So it is interesting here that they're talking about the last two dragons, and you're talking about Jon and Tyrion, who a lot of people believe, hey, the three heads of the dragon,
yeah,
Tyrion, Jon, Dany,
right, yeah, well, and so he has these, he's obsessed with them, but then the next part is sort of about, well, we'll get to the dragon dreams in a second, right?
Yeah,
because I think he's when Jon sort of interrupts him is when we get that, but before we get there. He kind of goes on to talk about, Aegon's conquest, as we had mentioned, and the dragons associated there. But I like that he was talking more about his own remote ancestor, King Loren of the Rock, right? Loren Lannister, and so we just covered that also in Aegon's conquest. But you get sort of this. Tyrion is thankful that he survived the battle. I'm here because you bent the knee. So. That's good. And he mentions that King Mern of the Reach opposed the Targaryen conquest, and that we know his line ended, and he was actually killed on the Field of Fire.
Yep, so. Which you talked about as well. This is all that stuff. This is where all this little segments here. Basically, this is all that stuff that got pulled and then expanded into World of Ice and Fire.
Well, what's crazy is it's 2 to 3 lines here that's expanded a little bit more in World of Ice and Fire, and will be even more expanded upon in Fire and Blood
when it comes out later this year. So,
really cool.
So then Jon comes up and says, "Why do you read so much?" Tyrion looked up at the sound of the voice. Jon Snow was standing a few feet away, regarding him curiously. He closed the book on a finger and said, "Look at me and tell me what you see." The boy looked at him suspiciously. "Is this some kind of trick? I see you, Tyrion Lannister." Tyrion sighed. "You are remarkably polite for a bastard, Snow. What you see is a dwarf. What are you, 12? 14, the boy said. 14, and you're taller than I will ever be. My legs are short and twisted, and I walk with difficulty. I require a special saddle to keep from falling off my horse, a saddle of my own design. You may be interested to know. It was either that or ride a pony. My arms are strong enough, but again, too short. I will never make a swordsman. Had I been born a peasant, they might have left me out to die or sold me into a slaver's grotesquerie. Alas, I was born a Lannister of Casterly Rock, and the grotesques are all the poorer. Things are expected of me." And then he goes on to talk about like my father's hand of the king and stuff like that. But,
and so,
and then just real quick here, and this is another one of these lines that's highlighted, a couple thousand times. King Robert, as my brother has his sword, King Robert has his warhammer, and I have my mind. And a mind needs books as a sword needs a whetstone. It is if to keep its edge.
It's absolutely for our book club. That is words to live by.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because we literally reread these chapters in these books, and we go back over them and stuff, and you just catch something every time you go back through it. And your guys' help out there, our patrons and just other listeners, you have no idea how much it adds to the show. It's unreal.
It really does.
Please keep
people,
sending the
because people send it, because you guys send us ravens, and we're like, literally, we'll be at work. I'll message Ezra, and I'm like, man, did you see this guy's theory? He's like, yeah. And I'm like, I don't know. Let's dive in. All right, so
right, yeah. So it's hard for us to maintain. Like today, I kept wanting to do work on the main show, and if it seemed kind of clipped earlier, it's like, well, we took out a bunch of stuff because like we were just it was going to turn into a 2-hour show on the Sons of the Dragon, you know.
Yep.
So, anyways, so yeah, I think that's shows you a lot of who Tyrion is and who he's going to be going forward. He is extremely smart, and he has a reason for everything that he does, but he's also kind-hearted. He's got sympathy, you know, for people, and he wants to, you know, he's kind to Cersei's children, right? You know, he's kind to other grotesques and cripples and bastards and stuff like that, you know, and he's I don't know, so that might be sometimes his, and whores are his weakness, right? You know, so those are sometimes his weaknesses. I think his sympathies or his compassion towards those folk. So, all right.
So then we get into the dragon dreams.
Yes. And this is cool because Tyrion starts to kind of open up and talk about hold on. His dreams.
One thing real quick. Huge line here. Anyway, so Tyrion tapped the leather cover of his book. That's why I read so much Jon Snow. The boy absorbed all that in silence. He had the Starks face, if not the name. Long, solemn, and guarded, a face that gave nothing away. Whoever his mother had been, she had left little of herself in her son. And that's just like a quick little, like 2-second, like change everything line, but it's just Gur kind of just throws that in there.
I had it all blocked off, and I was when you said, I was like, oh, what?
We can't skip that. Yeah.
Can't skip that because you know you think about the idea, if you were, again, a rabbit hole here, but if Rhaegar Targaryen was to be his father, that line just means so much, right? That
Absolutely.
he looks so much like his father. Now, it doesn't mean necessarily that it couldn't be that there's just the Stark blood in him through his sister. Because I don't think Tyrion here is thinking, well, oh yeah, I guess that would explain it if it was Ned's sister was his mother. You know, that would be where the Stark blood comes from, etc. Because Arya also looks a lot like, you know, the wild beauty of Lyanna and her father. So, but yeah, if you just take this for what it is right here, then he shouldn't. Then, you know, his mother, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. Then, you know, if he looks nothing like his mother. And if you are out there listening and you think, well, his mother must be Lyanna Stark, and he looks nothing like her, then that doesn't fit, does it? You know what I'm saying? So it kind of contradicts that R+L = J theory. So, but all right.
So now the dragon dreams.
Now the dragon dreams,
which is just interesting again because here you go talking about, Jon Snow's must not have any of his mother in him, and then you immediately start talking about dragons.
Yes. Now I'm going to make a distinction that I don't think some people have made about what he says about what Jon's dreams are. Okay, because they're different than Tyrion's. So Tyrion, you know, I don't know where you want to start with this, but I have a couple things underlined here that I'm just going to kind of read. I guess.
Go right
ahead. He's like, oh yes. Well, okay. First, so they talk about the dragons and how sad it is that they, you know, are gone. When I was your age, I used to dream of having a dragon of my own. And then, you know, Jon is sort of suspicious, you know, really, thinking almost like if I open up that I have dreams of grandeur or whatever that I'm going to get made fun of here. He's like, oh yes, even a stunted, twisted, ugly little boy can look down over the world when he's seated on a dragon's back. He says he used to start fires, you know, at Castle Rock and stare at the flames for hours.
Yeah.
Staring into the flames, right? Pretending they were dragon fire. Sometimes I'd imagine my father burning. At other times, my sister. Jon was staring at him. A look equal parts horror and fascination, right? So Tyrion laughs. Don't look at me that way, bastard. I know your secret. You've dreamt the same kind of dreams. And so to me, that means that he's saying that Jon dreamed dreams of his siblings, being in some way put down.
Right.
Because he's the one who has lived under this, I'm the bastard, I'm called these things by my name. Not necessarily dragons, but you've dreamt these same type and style of dreams in which you're putting your siblings down, or you become king in the north, or you become lord of Winterfell. That's the way I read it. But and for Tyrion, it was just dragons.
Well, I think that's why he's taken aback. I don't think he would be taken aback if they were just dragon dreams.
Yeah.
Like, well, why would he be like, no, that's because then he talks about the Night's Watch being honorable, as if like he wants to be honorable. So yeah, they could still involve dragons.
Sure, they could.
Yeah.
It just doesn't. I'm just saying the text doesn't actually really. I think
it leans more towards the idea of what you said, as opposed to the idea of dragon dreams.
Yeah, dreams of your siblings submitting to you and elevating you when for your whole life they've sort of looked down on you. Sansa definitely does. He's a bastard. He's our half brother.
Right.
Sure, I love him, but I know how I'm supposed to behave towards him. Society tells me that we're to look down on him for that. So. So Tyrion just kind of goes on to mock him a little bit. He says, "No, never. You've never had." Because Jon says, "No, I wouldn't dream those dreams." He's like, "Well, no doubt the Starks have been terribly good to you. I'm certain Lady Stark treats you as if you were one of her own, and your brother Robb, he's always been kind. And why not? He gets Winterfell, and you get the Wall. And your father, he must have good reasons for packing you off to the Night's Watch." And that's when Jon starts to yell at him. He yells at him a couple times to stop it. Stop.
Yeah, and then Tyrion feels bad, so he starts to walk over to like pat him on the back, and boom, he's like tackled by Ghost.
Right.
Which isn't the first time Tyrion gets kind of like
yeah, exactly. So yeah, and he's trying. He actually is walking over to reassure Jon. He makes him. He goes too far, and he's really just trying to, in his own cynical way, I guess, sort of like mock him, but yet educate him and like really, be honest with me here is what he's trying to do. But it hurts. The truth hurts sometimes, and it's not something Jon really wants to face. And Tyrion just sort of takes it a little too far and remembers that he's a young boy. He's 14, and he's hurt because he's leaving home, and he's seeing these rapers who are going to be his new brothers, and it's just not what he envisioned it being, and Tyrion's pointing that out, and that hurts, So stop it, and then finally, he tries to apologize. He never saw the wolf or where it was or how it came at him. So one moment he was walking towards Jon, the next he was flat on his back. All right. And so suddenly, he kind of hurts his back, and he can't really get up, so he's like, "Help me."
Yeah.
And
so then Jon's like, if you say please, and then
if you ask me nicely,
he does. And so then he helps him up, and then he says, this passage I have highlighted here, I think it's just funny. Why did he attack me? Tyrion asked with a sidelong glance at the dire wolf. He wiped blood and dirt from his mouth with the back of his hand. Maybe he thought you were a Grumkin. Tyrion glanced at him sharply, then he laughs, a raw snort of amusement that came bursting out. "Oh gods," he said, choking on his laughter. "I suppose I do rather look like a Grumkin. What does he do to Snarks? You don't want to know." Jon picked up the wineskin and handed it to Tyrion. And so that's another thing. Just Tyrion is just like, he's fine with making fun of himself. And
and it's a good joke. Jon makes a really good joke. Brings it full circle, because he was making fun of Grumkins and Starks. And so it turns out Tyrion is AKA a Grumkin.
Yeah.
And then they share a drink. And here I have something else underlined. Tyrion grinned at him. That's good, bastard. Most men. Okay. Oh, actually, first, the boy took the skin and tried a cautious swallow. So they're sharing this drink. They've reconciled. "It's true, isn't it?" he said when he was done. "What you said about the Night's Watch." Tyrion nodded. Jon Snow set his mouth in a grim line. "If that's what it is, then that's what it is." And Tyrion's kind of like proud of him, He said that's good. Most people would rather deny a hard truth than face it. And then he says, "Most men, but not you." So this is Jon Snow saying this back to Tyrion. "No," Tyrion admitted, "not me. I seldom even dream of dragons anymore. There are no dragons."
Just another, interesting.
Right. So and then to kind of wrap the chapter up, they go back. They have a little bit of stew. There's Yoren's cutting up a squirrel, and it's just there's actually a mention of the black bread that they're eating and the food, which I thought was interesting because we've been looking at the A Feast of Ice and Fire cookbook. So, but anyways, Tyrion was the last to retire as always. So they've made camp, they've ate, and Jon has drawn the first watch for the night. Okay, and Tyrion was the last to retire as always. I think that's interesting. He's always up. He's always the last to leave. Maybe not necessarily the first to rise, but think back to Winterfell. He was up all night reading books and studying, and just continues to work his craft in a sense. So.
And then it just talks about Tyrion was last to retire as always, and it says the boy stood near the fire, faced hard, still and hard, looking deep into the flames.
Yep. Tyrion smiled sadly and went to bed. One thing it mentions a lot in there, the boy.
Yeah. And
Maester Aemon says to him later that he needs to kill the boy.
Yeah, same thing he tells Aegon.
Right. It mentions it so many times, and just talking about how, and it starts to change over the course of this book and the next book, and I think it's something cool to kind of watch. So, all right, we are done with the reread this week. Like I said, again, send us any ravens or questions you might have about that chapter or any other theories, just questions in general to btkcast@gmail.com. Cool Connections, I think we went over that.
Yep, Red Keep, yeah. So
for this week, so we do have a raven this week.
Yeah, this is it's kind of a couple parter here. It's kind of a conversation I had with Sir Alex, who I believe I was kind of unclear as to exactly where he's from. His Facebook says he's from South Africa, but I think he maybe is from South Africa, but now lives in England.
Okay.
Kind of confused.
Yeah.
But, sometimes that's my Facebook creeping, and that's where the rabbit hole, it leads me down to figure out where people are from. Greetings from Bjor, Whisper of the Old Gods, Lord of Giants. I've recently been thinking about a theory I heard a while ago. Is it possible that back in the War for the Dawn that there were different factions of the Children of the Forest, those who created the others and those who sided with the first men? After the evil Children of the Forest realized what a super weapon they'd created with the others, they had a change of heart and lured. I don't know.
Bloodcrow.
This is Bloodcrow. There may be a. He may have been using Google Translate.
No, I think he means Blood Raven.
Raven. Yeah.
But he's talking about the three-eyed crow.
Right.
Well, it turns so Blood Crow. That's what I thought was. Means Blood Raven.
Yeah, to the north to help fight against like a guerrilla war in the north to help fight the others after being stuck behind the wall.
No, wait, he couldn't mean that. Lord Blood Crow to the north. Because he's talking about Dawn Age. I'm sorry, I was completely later on.
Yeah,
I get it. Okay,
I don't know. And the good faction of children have gone into hiding onto the Isle of Faces, and maybe it's kind of like their last sanctuary. So I guess kind of before we go on to like some of his other stuff.
Yeah.
So let's dive into that. So the idea that there are possibly two factions, that's possible because you see that a lot in just a lot of things. You'll see kind of factions splinter off and things like that. Like all you have to do is look at religion, especially if you go back to actually when Gurr is drawing a lot of inspiration. I mean, you look at just like Christianity and all of the factions and splintering offs that goes on during like the Crusades and all of those things. So it is possible that they end up kind of fighting themselves and stuff like that. But
yeah, I think it could be actually. I mean, you talk about the their green seers, right? And what they were doing for when they were breaking the land bridge, and then possibly what they were working on at the neck. And if those things didn't work out, did all the children agree to those? Right. To those terms, I don't know. And then when you go, I really do believe that the children might have realized they made a mistake. If we look at what happened in the show when they create the others, and because the Dawn Age again happens before the Long Night, right? So they create these others, and did that create this other faction where they followed the others and they used them, and then another part of the children were sort of like, that was wrong. They've turned out to be monstrous, uncontrollable, people. We've done something wrong here, and they're trying to correct it. Because I go back to the idea that the three-eyed crow, when he is or Bloodraven, when he goes ranging and is lost. That's why I thought he was talking about was that he was lured by the children to help them right their wrongs,
possibly,
and that they have decided that no, that was wrong. We need to, change this, because it's they were under attack. They were using the magics and the powers that they had to wall off or keep out the first men and just to survive, right? And they created something much darker than they could possibly, imagine. And the long night comes, and that happens.
Right.
So I kind of think that's cool. I actually think that could very well be the case. But it's such a long time ago that things are so, it's the speculation is, it's hard. It's hard to determine. But the fact that we got like a, Bran looking that far back into history and seeing that is crazy.
Yeah, and maybe
in the show,
and that's a distinction actually in kind of his second question, which kind of ties into it too. We'll jump into it too. Another one is that the Night King. So this is kind of another theory here. One is that the Night King made a deal with the first Starks after the war and agreed to create kind of like a demilitarized zone and demanded sacrifices to keep their population up. And that's kind of like where the walls created. After the Starks forgot the agreement with the Walkers, the 13th Lord Commander actively tried to make amends with the Night King. He took an other as a bride and started sacrificing men to the Night's Watch and others. And this is where you get the name of the Night King. And he does want to make a distinction here that there's a difference between the Night King and the Night's King. In the book, I don't actually. So the Night's King is like the 13th Lord Commander, right?
Yep.
And that also there is the Night King, who is
in
like
the show,
like the villain character. Now in the show he may be the same person. We haven't really been ever told that story in the show, so I don't think we're gonna get it.
Yeah.
In the books, that character doesn't really exist. There's just the others. We may get a leader of the others who may end up being a new Night King. Maybe it's somebody who's been around longer. Could end up still being this 13th Lord Commander, but maybe not. So
yeah, what's crazy, we did a little research on this. So that 13th Lord Commander, the Night's Watch was formed after the long night had been ended, as Azor Ahai has come back and defeated, was the champion, and they create the wall. Bran the Builder goes there. 13 Lord Commanders later, you have the Night's King,
as like the Night's Watch King,
right? The Night's Watch King, who marries that what looked like a female other, although they're described in the book as having neither sex really, but what have you. And actually, one of the Starks of Winterfell agrees with Joramun, the king beyond the wall, and they actually consolidate their forces. They unite Wildling and Stark to bring down the Night's Watch, or the Night's King, because he had basically put a spell on like this on and had been making sacrifices to the others, and had put a spell on the Night's Watch, and they were under his command. So it was kind of cool, because we talked about in the first couple chapters here, Ned Stark saying he would have to call the banners to go beyond the wall to face this king, or to put this king down, and then to think that there was an alliance once between King Joramun beyond the wall and a Stark in Winterfell. And actually, what happens is they eradicate, or it says that his name is lost to time and history. Like it's taken out of any books. Whoever that commander was, his house or who he belonged to, gone. Nothing. Might have been a Stark. Actually, might have actually been a Stark, and that's why they wanted it, blotted out. So I thought it was kind of cool.
Yeah. So so then he talks about that, and he says maybe after the Night's King's death, more wildlings pushed beyond the wall. Maybe the others are retaliating to a broken agreement of blood, and believe that the only way for them to survive is to conquer the entirety of Westeros and drive them back, drive back the stabbing men back into the ocean. And so actually, anyway, what I found like most interesting here was the idea that like maybe because that is something that we kind of see in the show, or and possibly in the books. I'm kind of just blanking right now. about the Craster Keep, and he's sacrificing the babies.
Yeah.
And yeah, because they don't really, I guess, we don't really know why now. And maybe it is because sacrifices have stopped.
Yes. Yeah, there's a lot of, we've been talking about that for a couple episodes now as to why now? Why did they choose this time? Chaos in the kingdom, stopping of the sacrifices, and also the difference between those babies being, sacrificed, willingly given, versus raising the dead,
right?
Against their will, so to speak. You know what I mean? It's very different.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't know. I don't know exactly why that they've decided to come south. The time is right. Yeah, I don't know. It's really kind of crazy to think about.
Maybe dragons are back, and they're nervous about the dragons back, or
yeah, like something has awoke. These two, again, I go back to Rolor, right?
Because winter has come many times before.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But, like the wall's there. So how do they get beyond the wall? Right.
Yeah. And I think the thing is, too, that this would be like the second long night, right? Mm-hmm. That's coming again. And the Starks, when they say winter is coming, they really are. They're talking about winter in general, but there's that underlying meaning that winter,
right.
The others. And they use, Ned and those guys when they make their curses. The others take your eyes, or, the others this, the others that. They mention them quite a bit, actually, to the point where it's like, wow, where did that curse originate from, mm-hmm. right? I mean, they were obviously something real. And we know they're real because the first chapter, we see them laughing and mocking, Men of the Night's Watch, mm-hmm. killing them. So, but...
yeah, they're a little more human in the books as opposed mm-hmm. to, like, monstrous zombies.
Yeah, they're almost like... They're also very... They seem quick, swift, agile. You know what I mean?
Right.
So,
and and I was thinking about this the other day, as to why, because if you go back and you find we have older videos and stuff like that we did on other stuff when we were
mm-hmm.
talking about Game of Thrones back in the day, and we kept saying, like, in season 6 and season 5, like, when is this gonna get going? Like, at some point, like, the wall's gonna have to come down and we're gonna have to get this going. And this is another thing where I think the books and shows are going to be totally different. Is I was trying to think as a why this
mm-hmm.
is going on, and then I started thinking, well, maybe it just has to do with, like, not just that the show is doing things their own way, it's that the show is doing things in a way that has to work for television,
mm-hmm.
and that it's a lot bigger budget, when you're talking about doing the others, because
mm-hmm.
there's a lot more special effects that are involved, and
yeah,
I mean, it took 50, like they just filmed a scene for a battle, we're going to presume, between the others and the North. That's like 55 nights to film. Like, that's huge. That costs a ton of money.
I know.
That costs a ton of money. And there's also ratings. Like, we know that they specifically kind of cut out some of the Dornish stuff because, like, ratings did not do as well
mm-hmm.
with like the Dornish stuff. So that's just story that they're just like, nah, we're cutting that because we have to adhere to ratings, mm-hmm. as opposed to Gur, who's just writing the story that everyone's going to buy it, so he can do whatever he wants.
Well, even your mainstream just person who's seen the TV series. I mean, you and I, who have even our buddy Tom and Sir Thomas and Sir David, we've read the series, we've done a lot of research on it, and still the names are daunting, and like the houses and the alliances and things like that. So you imagine that is part of the making the TV show. My own sister, who loves watching it, it's just like it gets lost in just the reduced amount of content that's put up on the HBO show. So mm-hmm. yeah, it does make a lot of sense that when Dorne was introduced, like, who are all these people, and like another name and house we have to really keep track of, kind of hard to do. So. Mm-hmm. So I get that. And you're right. It could be, it's, again, very different. It's easier in a book to have all these lines in dialogue where you mention the others over mm-hmm. and over and over again in lore and legend. Mm-hmm. More opportunities for that to happen in a book sprinkled out than in a TV show.
I mean, also just think about this is, it's easier to film, because I think they film in, like, Croatia, a lot of stuff,
mm-hmm.
And, like, Spain. They film in Spain a lot and stuff like that. Well, it's a lot easier to film in Spain than it is to film in, I guess, like, Greenland and Iceland.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, where it's like cold and you're in, like, the mountains.
Right.
Yeah, it's hard, like, like, to film. So
right.
I think that's why it's kind of like, if you're just a show watcher, you're like, wait, why are these, like, they're just always there? Because I had watched the shows first, and I was, like, kind of confused. I was like, are they ever gonna come south? You know, so
yeah. So, anyways, Sir Alex, I like this. You know, this idea that perhaps there is this agreement that was made, and it depended upon sacrifices to keep up their population. So that is very, very.
I think it's a huge point.
Yeah,
I think it's a really big point. Like literally, I was at work and I just kind of clicked and I was like, yeah, actually, that might be the thing.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So. Anyways, I just thought that is really cool.
Because think about this, Craster just kind of like the wildlings, we know they kind of have like encampments, but they do end up kind of moving around and stuff because when Jorah Mormont is going to go march and figure out, like he's like send the Night House, we're going to go march on Mance Rayder. Sam is like finding these maps, and Jorah Mormont's kind of upset because he's like, none of these encampments still hold, you know, because they move around. He's like, but the strivers, or like the mountains and the hills and the rivers are all still in the same place. Mm-hmm. And he's like, well, okay, that gets us a good point. So we know that the wildlings move around, but Craster just hangs out.
Well, here's the thing.
Right, so Craster's obviously, he just puts those sacrifices out, and he's fine. They let him be.
They let him be. Absolutely, they do. And those are his sons.
Yeah.
Exactly. So the ones who come back to get the other sons are his sons.
Yeah.
That's their father, essentially, right? So I was thinking, too, the other wildlings might have a similar process, too. We just don't know about it.
Right.
Perhaps they also were giving sacrifices or things like that we didn't know about. Craster just happens to stay in one spot and is dedicated to, you know, to that lifestyle and knows that it's just something, you know, he has to do. Maybe he had an encounter with them at one point and that was what they needed. Because it is we almost overlook it. We don't think about it enough that is he what's keeping them stocked, you know, with this honoring almost this agreement, because Sir Alex mentions that they push the wildlings as they push north. It almost, again, if the others are up there and much further north, and they feel that pressure of the wildlings pushing and growing and growing and growing, and they're not getting enough sacrifices and not replenishing their own people or whatever, then they do feel like they need to push south and destroy and make a new agreement with whoever. You know, it could just be this agreement that they're making with local tribes that is not enough to suffice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if you look at the map, so you have like Hardhome. So this is something else you always have to kind of look at when you actually look at the map. Like, it's not, once you get beyond the wall, it's not just like solid ice.
No,
above it. In the show, we kind of see it. So it goes like up and then over to the west, and then there's like a little bit here. There's like a little bit to the east, but it kind of.
And isn't the east mostly the woods?
Yeah, the east is you have like the woods,
straight
and that's
shot where
like Hardhome, you know, which is a huge wildling kind of like, I guess, city. I guess.
Yeah.
It's like all the way on like the ocean, just kind of hanging out
on the west, right?
On the east.
Is it on the east? Okay.
Yeah, and then as you go west is where you get to like the lands of always winter, where it's like it's like super icy. You get over the mountains of like, then you have like the Frost Fangs, and the Fist of the First Men is north of Craster's Keep. Craster's Keep is like right on the edge of like, it's like right once you get past the Haunted Forest, and then that's where you start to get to like the Frost Fangs.
Yeah. Okay.
So really, Craster is kind of maybe what keeps them from actually going over to like Hardhome, because Hardhome is not. It's not like, just if you look at some of the maps, it looks a little more green to that side than it does like white.
Right, and what's interesting is too, like when you look at the map going north. So I just pulled this up, so you guys might want to take a look at it. When John and those guys travel north past Craster's Keep, they run into the Fist of the First Men, right, and that's over. You know,
it's just north of Craster's Keep.
Right. I think then, you know, moving down, a lot of the wildlings are coming down out of those mountains, that last little mountain range where you've got, you know, the Giant's Stairs, Milkwater, Thenn, Frostfangs, and so on. There's still some trickling of people there who are coming east, I guess, as you would say, past the Fist of the First Men. So Mance Rayder is gathering, you know, people in that area and taking them south. But I get what you're saying, that Craster, the others are clear down in there, man.
Yeah.
So the others have no. I mean, it's not like they're always in the lands of always winter. What is over there? Are these their advanced scouts?
Yeah.
Right. So they have a whole population or people that live in the lands of always winter and the frozen shore, but yet they send their scouts out to replenish their stores, their population,
right?
Through Craster and maybe some of these other, wildlings. Maybe they don't have to be given or sacrificed, but they can be taken. Maybe they take live babies, they take live children and convert them or whatever. So I know that they can raise the dead. That's very different from what they're actually trying to really do, though. So.
Yeah, I've got like 5 maps. 5 maps. What if I actually just found a new one that's like really, really cool? I like
nice.
it a lot. I like it a lot here. But yeah, so just when you look at these maps here, because that's something else. Whenever time I look at the maps, I'm always just like oh wow, yeah. Because I mean, look at it. Like if you're like, all you have to do is make a boat. Like if you're the wildlings, all you gotta do is make the boat. Because look at, you got Hardhome, and then you got Skagos right over there, which we know is where Rickon's taken to later. Like. Yeah, maybe I guess it's too icy up there to sail across, but
yeah. So, anyways, I think that's good. I think we've Sir Alex, thank you for the Raven. We appreciate it, and it's definitely got us thinking. So really enjoyed it. Okay, do we have another Raven, or is there more to his?
Yeah, he just has one kind of last question, and that's kind of and then that's kind of it for today. Did the Valyrians make armor out of Valyrian steel? I was just wondering, because the evolution of weapons and armors becomes more as with the evolution of weapons, armor becomes more redundant. So with the dragons and Valyrian steel weapons, would there be any point in armor? And skill would be the factor of combat, much like today, where we only have like breastplates, like bulletproof vests to stop shrapnel, etc. But our limbs aren't really protected. Would there be any point in? Is there like a law of diminishing return?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know necessarily. Have you looked?
So I looked into it, and the only thing that I could find is in one of the, I guess, sample chapters of Winds of Winter. It's believed that Euron Greyjoy has Valyrian steel armor.
Okay.
We do know that some houses have like a Valyrian steel axe as opposed to, like, say, a sword. But I would have to imagine that there is Valyrian steel armor.
Yeah. I could see that, and it could just be something that's lost really to,
time.
Well, to the Doom, yeah, and all that stuff, yeah. So that's a great question. But yeah, we'll have to look. Is that the only reference you could find?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe as we tear through the book, there might be more. Because sometimes, you don't be surprised here. The wiki doesn't have everything.
Doesn't.
It'll send you click on those references, see what chapter it's in, and go read the chapter. Because sometimes there's more surrounding that particular reference. So, okay. All right. Again, thanks, Sir Alex. We appreciate that. Send those ravens to btkcast@gmail.com. All right. On to Man the Wall. This is where we invite you to hop over and check out the Black Council episode 1. And also, before we get into our knighting ceremony, which we have a knighting ceremony today for you, I wanted to mention a quick plug for a new series that we're going to be doing called Green Dreams. Green Dreams episode 1 should be coming maybe in July.
Yeah.
So we'll have Green Dreams episode 1 coming there. And basically it's something I've been pulling out these questions. I've been looking at where A Dance of Dragons ends. And I was telling Sir Matt this the other day, and I was like, "There's so many unanswered questions."
Oh my gosh!
And it's you could speculate in any number of ways, and it goes back to what we had said a couple years ago to one another when we were watching the series, and you were like, how is he going to finish this? What loose ends still need tied up? And I'm like, there's so many. Like I hope he takes 3 to 4 more books to finish it, but. For example, I've got a couple of questions here that I'll just kind of tease you guys with, which is who hired Darkstar to kill Myrcella Baratheon? That's a pretty big one at the end of the book. Where is Edric Dane or Edric Ned Dane? Let's see. What's going to become of Beric Dondarrion and Illyria Dane? So you can see a trend here. I'm really focused on the Danes for a little bit. But then I also have something, for example, like Edric Storm. I was kind of inquiring about him and his whereabouts and what he is possibly going through in his role and what he might, what might happen in the future. So if you have more of those ideas, if you've read the series and you're looking at like unanswered questions or a thread that maybe continued here in Winds of Winter, we got a whole year or more to discuss where this may go. And some of these things have been hinted at in the first couple chapters of Winds of Winter. And so, again, that'll be a series called Green Dreams. In that, I'll let you guys kind of vote on some of those topics on patreon.com, and we'll dive into it. So it's pretty easy to speculate on, and if you have speculation yourself, we'll try to incorporate that in the episode. So, all right, my friend, we are on to our knighting ceremony. So, Cat, in the name of the warrior, I charge you to be brave. In the name of the father, I charge you to be just. In the name of the mother, I charge you to defend the young and innocent. In the name of the maid, I charge you to protect all women. In the name of the smith, I charge you to mend the broken. In the name of the crone, I charge you to seek wisdom. In the name of the stranger, I charge you to face death with sword in hand. Rise, Lady Cat of the woodland realm. Oh man, it's just like this is one I've been wanting to finish. This knighting ceremony. It's mentioned in the Dunk and Egg series, and Lord Baratheon, I think, is knighting. Gosh, I forget his name. One of the Applewoods, right? Yeah. And
Sir Stefan.
Yeah, it was the other one, his cousin, right? Yeah. And so, Dunk's all nervous because he doesn't know the words. How do I do it? What do I do? And he just he takes over and sends him to go talk to Baelor. And it's that trial by 7, ancient.
Yeah, and we actually just found even, I guess, another version, which is in A Clash of Kings. I'm rereading through it right now, and it is when Brienne of Tarth pledges her, I guess, allegiance to Catelyn Tully, Catelyn Stark, and that's almost like a sworn sword.
Yep.
Sort of thing. So that's the difference between, you have hedge knights who are just knights.
Right.
They're just a knight.
Just a knight.
And then you have sworn swords who are basically like a hedge knight.
Or a knight.
Just someone, and then they swear their sword to a specific house.
Right.
Or something.
Yeah.
And so we just found that one, and that one is actually a little more outlined. We actually have the whole thing. It's in the book. So that's another option if you want to do that as well.
So we got 3 options for you. So if you listened to last week's episode, we had a custom one by Lord Adam Parker, and then we had Sir Jared Gebhardt. We had his knighting ceremony, and then so now we have Lady Cat of the Woodland Realm. So each week we're going to be knighting people, and we'll continue those on the main show.
And then for those of you who have also taken the black, you have that as well, where you say your Night's Watch vows.
Right, exactly. Just send those to us.
There's a lot of options.
A lot of options. It's just fun because when we refer to people and we reply back in emails and we send ravens back and forth. By the way, Sir Matt is working on a kit for us to do some actual pretty badass
some pretty cool stuff for our
ravens.
patrons. Yeah. So,
but anyways, we're just teasing some stuff here. So we'll get you guys some pictures of that later on. But anyways, so Man the Wall, hit us up at patreon.com/bend the knee for all of those extra episodes, your custom sigil, and knighting ceremonies, and just you guys get to influence the show. Everyone who sends a raven gets in on Follow-Up Friday, but the main show and where we go and what we do on Patreon series is basically up to those who sign up on Patreon.
Absolutely.
All right.
So, all right, everyone, we want to thank you for playing the Game of Thrones. In our next episode, we will be discussing Chapter 14, Catelyn 3.
If you like our podcast, don't forget to subscribe, like us, write a review, or leave a comment, or send us a raven at btkcast@gmail.com.
We'll see you in a week, and remember, family, duty, honor.